Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar. It's time to think about digital health and cloud transformation brought to you by channel partners and channel futures. My name is Magali Beaton. I'm a Senior Program Coordinator at Channel Partners and Channel Futures. Before we begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help button on your player console to receive assistance in solving common issues. We welcome your questions during today's event. In order to submit your questions to today's presenter, simply type your question into the question window on your screen and then hit the Submit button. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. But please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we will add them to the queue. If at any time you are having audio difficulties or advancing the slides, simply hit your F5 to refresh your webcast console. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Channel Partners and Channel Futures website later today for you to review. You will be notified by email when the on-demand webinar is available. Today's web seminar is being sponsored by J2 Cloud Services. We will be hearing from Howard Cohen of HMC right now, and Jeffrey Sullivan, Chief Technology Officer for J2. And with that, let's turn things over to Howard.
Thank you, Magali. And hello, everybody. Welcome to It's Time to Think About Digital Health. We're here today to talk about facts, just the facts. And waited all day to say that. Lots of reasons that fax, after all these years, is still very popular and in heavy use. It's got a long history as a preferred transfer mechanism. Everybody's got a fax machine. You always know you can reach them that way. You can get proof of receipt. You know, your fax machine or your fax system will tell you that it has completed sending, which means that you're guaranteed that it's been delivered. So that's what we want from a transport system, isn't it? It requires less setup and configuration than other communication systems. Basically, you just plug it into the wall and plug it into the phone line, so anybody can do that. It's secure, as you'll hear more about shortly. We're also going to talk about data sovereignty, which is an important issue for a lot of people who are using fax today, and interoperability, the ability to get fax working with everything else in your network. So what we're really going to be talking about is moving from the fax machine to digital fax, online fax. And this is the next generation, this is the next evolution of fax. Here to talk with me about it is the Chief Technology Officer for J2 Cloud Services, Jeff Sullivan. Hey, Jeff.
Afternoon, Howard. Hi, everyone.
There we are. There we both are now. Welcome to our presentation today. Before we do anything else, I guess it would be a good idea if you told everybody a little bit about yourself and a little bit about eFax.
Sure. So I am, as you mentioned, the Chief Technology Officer at J2 Cloud Services for the Cloud Fax division. We do Cloud Fax, eFax, SFax, many other fax brands, but also secure document exchange and digital interoperability, especially with a focus on healthcare in our consensus products. The way that we think about products as a company is kind of becoming the trusted leader in secure document exchange for organizations that for which secure document exchange is their mission. So we're a mission-enabling company, and it's really important for us to think about fax as a step in that process or that evolution, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is that process rather than fax per se. And the way that we think about it at J2 is really customers have businesses to accomplish. They're using tools and techniques that help them further that. And our job here is to enable the channel partners to understand, how do these interoperability and CloudFax fit into the digital transformation that a lot of these businesses are going through?
Okay. I know I stole a little bit of your thunder just in the introduction, but why do you feel fax is still a preferred data transport? And particularly, since we're going to be talking about it, why is it a preferred transport for healthcare?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. When it comes to healthcare, fax has a really long history, right? It is kind of the document exchange mechanism of choice in healthcare, and to this day remains so, even in the face of other interoperability options, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I think some of the points you mentioned are key, right? It's simple. Everybody knows about faxes, and I think it's pervasive in the sense that while you may have in any given healthcare organization or healthcare provider's office maybe 3 or 4 legitimately viable ways to exchange a document, a clinical record, a lab request, a lab report, prescription. The one that you can be absolutely certain of, if I say, Dr. Howard, you need to send this report to Dr. Jeff, and you're in Ohio and I'm in California or whatever. The one thing that you can be almost certain of is that you can get it there by fax. Everything else is more of a discussion, more of a dialogue, maybe configurations, figuring things out. Can you receive it here? Can you receive it there? And I think so fax has kind of become that, if you will, not necessarily the lowest common denominator, but there's an element of that. But what it is if you told me you have one chance to get this document across, fax is the one that I'm most confident will work.
Yeah, it's a good answer. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about healthcare, and obviously healthcare needs everything you just described. It needs the certainty that it can get the information where it needs to be to take good care of patients. Let's go a little bit deeper in. I mentioned earlier in the introduction data sovereignty and interoperability. These are 2 words that seem to keep on cropping up in our conversations.
Sure. So data sovereignty. Great.
Yeah. What are they and why are they important?
Why do you care? Right. So data sovereignty is a fancy term for keep my data in some location, right? And this is really relevant in a lot of regulated industries where the laws and the compliance regs that you're required to follow require you to ensure that the data stays in a certain region, either for privacy, regulations, whether it be something like HIPAA and its high trust or high tech certification requirements, or GDPR, right? If you're talking about in the European Union around privacy, California has the CCPA provisions, and Canada has versions for PIPEDA. There are all these regulations that say this data cannot leave this area without, say, a customer's written prior approval. And so a lot of customers in these regulated industries, and this is certainly true of healthcare, but it's also true in legal, in financial services, and more it's becoming true in kind of any communication that contains any kind of privileged or sensitive information about a buyer, a consumer, or a legal entity with all of these international regulations, that the data stays in a certain sovereign region. And so the interesting challenge, I think, in particular comes with these global offerings is a lot of them are built to be kind of globally distributed, and they don't necessarily honor boundaries. And that's a great thing for, say, redundancy and availability, but it's a real challenge when you say, you know what, my data cannot leave the borders of the US, or my data cannot leave the borders of Canada or the EU or what have you. Data sovereignty allows systems to partition their global system into a system that can be specific to the US or Canada or whatever that region is. And data sovereignty gets particularly tricky when it comes to fax, in that the telephone lines often you don't have direct control over, and they may route that call wherever they need to make sure it gets from point A to point B. And in fact, it may leave a sovereign region as a result of that. So there's a lot of work you have to do to ensure that this data does not leave a sovereign region once you get things like telephony and telecommunications into place. Now, interoperability, on the other hand, is kind of hand in glove with that. Interoperability is, as I mentioned earlier, there's all these different systems that exist out there. In healthcare especially, there are a bunch of different mechanisms for transporting files around. And the problem is, if you speak French and I speak English, how do we communicate, right? If I want to send via fax and you want to receive a message by, say, secure direct messaging or by FHIR or HL7, we need to have a means by which I can send however I need to send, and you can receive it however you want to receive it, and we can still be able to communicate with each other. And that ability to interoperate is where you have this whole notion of interoperability. My ability to talk with you, even though we're not natively speaking the same language, we have to have some translation layer that allows me to speak in one language, you to speak in another, and we can still communicate with each other.
Got it. Interoperability is pretty much a global issue. With the Internet of Things and everything else, everything needs to be able to talk to each other. And just as important in fax as any other technology. We've been talking about healthcare and really focusing mainly on diagnostic data, healthcare data that helps take care of patients, which is the most important data. But healthcare is also a business. And the healthcare business uses electronic medical record keeping, EMR. Are the healthcare organizations integrating cloud fax into EMR as well as diagnostic data?
Absolutely. So this data may be just a little bit stale, maybe as much as a year and a half stale, but as of about a year and a half ago, 70% of all clinical data was exchanged via fax at some point in that transaction. It's kind of mind-boggling. So there is an awful lot, and simply put, every single kind of healthcare-related information is exchanged via fax today. But you're right. A lot of these systems are operating in their EHRs or EMRs, which kind of take it all in the digital domain. And it's important for you to be able to take that information of how it's being sent and bring it in. That's one of the aspects of interoperability, is making sure that whether it's faxed or sent via secure direct messaging or HL7 or other direct mechanisms, however that's coming in, you're able to load that into your EHR, and conversely, you're able to get something out of your EHR or EMR and deliver it to a customer who can't receive it via direct or HL7 or FHIR messaging, but does have a fax machine. So that need for interoperability is exacerbated by these EMRs, and every one of them is incorporating cloud fax into its offering, either via API integrations, application programming interface integrations, via document management systems that incorporate a document via secure email delivery or other mechanisms, and then automate the import into the EHR, or just direct integrations themselves. A lot of times these days, you can deliver a fax message wrapped in one of these other messages and directly integrate it within the EMR itself.
Interesting. As I think about it, if you're talking about electronic medical record keeping, I suppose you could apply the same logic, the same thinking to other industries beyond healthcare. What are some other industries that are benefiting from fax, and how are they benefiting from it? So
as you can imagine, any of the regulated industries tend to take a fairly heavy use of fax. So this is things like legal and financial services. They also have document management solutions and workflow management solutions that incorporate fax into their workflow. But it may surprise you to learn, it certainly surprised me to learn this when I joined, that manufacturing is actually, so healthcare, clearly the number one industry for cloud faxing or faxing in general, but manufacturing is the number two industry. So certainly there is a lot of regulations around commerce and manufacturing, but this is not as heavily regulated an industry as some, and yet it is an extremely heavy user of fax. So, you talk about healthcare is the number one, manufacturing is the number two that we find, and then legal and financial services are a close, third and fourth.
Interesting. As you speak about all these industries, one of the things that I've been talking about a lot in this webinar series lately is unified communications and how it has the potential to replace a lot of other communications, like telephone, for example. Now that we're talking about cloud fax and we're moving into the realm of digital transmission and the internet and so forth, I don't know that I can think of many unified communications providers who include cloud fax in their offerings. What's been your experience?
So some of them do. The challenge for them is that cloud fax, digital fax in these offerings is often a bit of an afterthought. And the challenge is, one of the benefits of fax is that it just works. When you put it in as an afterthought, cloud fax and digital fax, and I think we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a moment, it's different, right? It is different than your traditional plain old telephone service fax. And it's important that it works just as well, right? You really need to think about faxing capability like power in an outlet, right? You just plug it in and it works, right? You mentioned that earlier. Mm-hmm. And so it's really key for customers that when they make this digital transformation, that all of the services they're making use of come across seamlessly, and they get all of this benefit of going digital, right? Better scalability, better reliability, more convenience, less physical infrastructure to deal with. But that can't come at the cost of degraded service or frustration. And so what's really important for these UCaaS providers is to think about, is fax something that I'm going to focus on? And I can tell you, being a company that does focus on it, there is a lot to it in the cloud world that you need to be thinking through. And for a lot of them, it's just not a key focus for them. So oftentimes they either don't address fax, and so it becomes a gap in the new offering, or what they've got is not a very compelling offering. And so, I think these UCaaS providers can think really strongly about bundling in a cloud fax solution that is dedicated and focused on being effective in the digital domain, and using that as part of their offering so that the customers get what they're expecting, which is, this is just way better than it ever was before. It's so much more convenient for me. It just works better. It's clean. I don't have all this equipment hanging around. And they're not bothered by, well, it's mostly better, but there's a little bit of a challenge here with, some things don't work quite as well. And so, that's the kind of thing that you want to think about is, how do you make this seamless for your customers or your customers' customers to make this leap into the cloud and the digital world?
Well, beyond delivering faxes directly into one common universal inbox, the way they're trying to deliver everything else, what are other ways in which they can integrate it?
So that's the beauty of moving out of the physical and into the digital. Your options are really just all across the board. So from a very simple perspective, you can do something like delivering faxes, for example, into an email inbox or a unified inbox. You can talk about bringing it into a document management system. You can talk about kicking off workflows with business process automation, BPA tools, or robotic process automation tools that can take action on the document based on source of document, maybe some of the metadata that comes in with a fax, or there's even some more sophisticated things you can do that maybe we'll talk about in a little bit that get much more sophisticated. But you've got those things. You've also got API integrations where you can wire this integration directly into some existing tooling, some existing systems that you've got. You can make it very, very deep. You can talk about using some of these interoperability options to wedge it into an existing or a brand new digital workflow for a healthcare system, an EMR, or for a point of sale system, or a document processing system, or an accounts payable system. So there's all of these ways that you can integrate, from a simplest fax to document delivery into file folders that get watched by other processes, to existing tools that take an incoming fax and then fire off a job, a script, a task based on the contents, based on the metadata, based on time of day, based on numbers that are being called to or called from. So there's just a lot of ways that you can incorporate it into your flow. And what that keeps you from having to do is that notion of pulling pages off the fax machine, handing them to somebody to start off a workflow, or scanning them and then putting them somewhere to start a workflow. You can start to wire that in more directly. So it's an efficiency enabler for the organization, in addition to all the other conveniences and reliabilities of going into the cloud.
So I guess what we're talking about, one of the complaints I always heard about fax was that it was considered to be dead media. That is, once it was received, you had it on a piece of paper, and you really couldn't forward that or process that in any other way. So basically what you're saying is that one of the big benefits of moving away from plain old telephone service as the medium for fax, moving it over to the internet, making it a digital reality, really puts it back in the mainstream of workflows, doesn't it?
It really does. So, we talk about fax being, faxes are data, right? Just like any information being transmitted through the cloud is data. by default, faxes are what we would call unstructured data, right? They're just dots on a page, and they're digital dots on a page, but they're just dots on a page. So where this starts to get really interesting is, as I said, you certainly have this other metadata about a fax that you can use to take some action. You can take action based on what number is faxing you. You can do things like look that number up in your customer database, say, oh, this relates to CVS Pharmacy, so I'm going to put it into this workflow and I'm going to kick it off immediately. You can look at what phone number they're calling. You can say, well, this phone number is used for purchase orders, so I'm going to route it into the purchasing department to expedite getting them into our Salesforce instance, say, or what have you. But you can also do much more sophisticated things, and this is where I think the state of the art is evolving now, which is turning that unstructured data back into structured data. And there's kind of two main paths that this can kind of follow. The first path is sometimes when the things are being sent and they start in the digital domain and they stay there the whole time, you can extract some of that extra metadata and pass it along with the fax in some form of encoded fashion so that you can get it. And that's a really interesting thing that a lot of companies have been working on, which really has to do more with secure document exchange and interoperability. But the second thing you can do is, even if at some point you've been reduced to dots on a page, as I talked about, there are now a lot of technologies that allow you to extract that data and create structured data out of the unstructured data. And this is something as simple as OCR, optical character recognition, or OMR and ICR, which is basically looking for check marks and whatnot, or handwritten information, which is kind of at the basic level of the way that you can extract data out of those, that image of the fax. But there's also more sophisticated techniques to extract data by saying, I know what this form is. I've seen it before, and I've created a template for it, and I know that I can extract the date from this place, and the customer name from that place, and the patient identifier number from this place. And that's something that's called usually zonal data extraction, or basically the ability to look at a template, map that to a template, and then extract data. These days, what gets really exciting is
it's the fax version of field mapping in database management. Yeah.
Exactly, field mapping. And what gets really cool is when you don't have to do that anymore, when you have an ability to extract this data without going ahead and saying, in advance, I know I'm going to get form X, Y, and Z, and this is what form X looks like, and here's where the data is, and this is what form Y looks like. But these days, with advances in machine learning and AI, you're able to do things like use natural language processing. So you just use something like OCR and OMR to extract the raw text from that page, and then you use natural language processing to go through that and reconstruct the context of that document from the text that's on the page. This is something that humans do all the time, but it's a very hard problem to solve from a computer perspective, and it's something that the state of the art in technology has really evolved into over the past couple of years and continues to do so. This is some of the hottest area of research and development, but the ability to take something that came in as a fax and start to extract semantically, the meaning of this document, the context that it had in place there, and basically take it back to something very close to what it was initially in some other form. Or what's really cool about it is, even if it wasn't in that form, even if it came in as a physical document, putting it back into that extracted document with that data in context, it's structured, you can do much more rich processing, much more rich workflow, much more rich efficiencies to be found by how you deal with that data when you get it back into a structured format. So that's the area that's very exciting, and that's where a lot of customers start to see the huge payoff of starting to integrate this more deeply into their workflows and take humans and push them upstream to the most critical parts of this, where machines are still not very good at dealing with it, but letting machines handle a lot of the lower level stuff and routing it into the appropriate places and all of those kinds of things. So that's an area that we're very, very excited about.
It's interesting. I'm sitting here thinking about how you're talking about the most leading edge technologies we have, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and basically what you've accomplished is you've married fax with those leading edge technologies and turned one of the oldest technologies we have into a technology of the future. That's really spectacular.
That's a great way to put it. We've got a situation here where fax is pervasive. And while my company thinks really long and hard about what comes next and how we help customers kind of bridge that transition into the future, you have business problems. Our customers, your customers, have business problems that they're trying to solve today. And none of them are in the business of doing better fax or dealing with this, right? They're in the business of treating patients or fulfilling prescriptions or processing insurance claims or processing legal dockets or dealing with manufacturing orders or parts requests or requisitions, right? Their business is that. What we're trying to do is get out of the way of that, but allow all of these mechanisms, all these communications channels that exist to start interoperating more cleanly together and realizing that promise of the digital future. Uh-oh. It seems like we may have just lost Howard. So I guess I will. There we go.
Apparently my internet connection dropped out. One of the good reasons to stick with plain old telephone service, isn't it? Oh boy, I apologize.
But it came right back. That's the beauty of digital.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let me. The last question that I have. As we're talking about, this technology of the future that fax has become, right now, most of our attendees are probably still using fax on phone lines. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody's ever seen a reason to change that doesn't know about what you're bringing to the table. So I think it'd be a good idea in this time of digital transformation, where everybody's talking about digital transformation. It seems to me that transforming from plain old telephone service to a digital service, integrating it with AI and ML, making it part of everybody's workflows again, is a fantastic value for people. How do they get started making that digital transformation?
Well, I think that there's two things to realize here. The first thing to realize is the world is changing, and it's changing on you whether you want it to or not. I would imagine that many people who think that they've got a POTS line into their home, into their business, don't realize that the odds are very high, probably north of 90% and trending toward 100% that you don't, that somewhere in there you've got a SIP connection, a voice over IP connection that is actually carrying your business. So when you think about, well, I'm fine the way I am, the reality is that the industry is moving on. And they're moving on because there's lots of economic reasons, but none of the telecommunication providers are investing in copper wire, if you will. Everybody is making the move to voice over IP or SIP, which is basically the transmission of audio data across various forms of the internet. So this notion that you can simply stick with what you've got is this false choice, because the phone companies are phasing out TDM and POTS lines. They are making that change even if you don't know it. But at some point, they will completely stop offering these services. Most of them, you can't get new TDM circuitry anymore anyway in a lot of areas. And even in lesser developed parts of the world, even they are pushing this transaction because the economics, the scalability, the investments are all driving them in that direction. It's just a business inevitability. So it's not a question of should you make the digital transformation. The only question is, do you do it on your terms, or do you do it on your carrier's terms when they say, you know what, this line that you've got is going away next year. You've got to transform to SIP. And if you don't, I'm going to do it behind the scenes, and you're going to get it anyway. And when you think about it that way, again, it's not a question of, when, or if. It's a question of when. And it's not a question of what's the benefit of me doing this. The answer is everybody's doing it, and it's just not a choice. So that's kind of the stick, if you will, right? The carrot, though, is all of the things that you get as part of this cloud transformation, right? There is less investment in equipment, which is great for all kinds of businesses, and it's certainly a driver of a lot of the digital transformation. It's additional new features and functionality that you either couldn't afford to add the equipment on your own to do, or that simply weren't capable of being done in a purely analog or POTS type of a telecommunications scenario. So there are really good options there, but you have to understand that with this transformation, some of these things are challenging. They're very difficult to do, and you really want to work with a partner who's going to help you along the way, right? So these digital transformations, going to a UCaaS solution from a POTS line, is a process. You need a partner, a reseller, an implementations partner that is going to help you go along the way, who is presumably bumped their shins a number of times in the past and knows what problems to avoid, so that you don't have to discover all of these things yourselves. And I can speak from our perspective. We made this move from largely copper to largely SIP a number of years ago, and it was a very painful multi-year process to kind of dial it in, figure out all the details. And to this day, you're constantly working with the vagaries of the telecommunication infrastructure, and things change all the time. So you want to have partners that are experienced, that have a lot of reach and a lot of critical mass, so that they can bring the benefit of their knowledge to you. That's one of the things that channel partners are good at.
You're talking about finding a partner who can move you from POTS and has already experienced some of the potholes along the way.
Exactly. Yep. The pothole's a good one. It's really important, because there's an awful lot of benefits to be had here, but there are challenges along the way, and you want somebody who has navigated those challenges so many times that they know how to avoid them rather than just dealing with them for you. But it is going to happen. Sooner or later, everybody will be forced into this world, so you might as well go on your terms and get all the benefits rather than thinking that you have an option to just stick with what you've got.
Got it. Okay. I know we mentioned at the outset that we would leave some time at the end for questions from the attendees. And I reached that point. I only have a few that have come in so far, but if you would like to ask questions, if you'd like a little more depth on any particular point that Jeff has been talking about, please open up the Q&A console at the bottom of your screen and enter a question. And if we have time at the end, we'll get to it. Here's some of the questions we've gotten so far. Okay, so I understand why they're asking this one. Once you've made that transition and you're in the digital world, every other technology we deal with requires some level of training, certification. You have to learn about compliance and how to handle that. What are some of the certifications that engineers should have? Or even you talk about these partners. What certifications should you look for from them to make sure that you've got somebody who's really qualified?
So it varies by industry, but a lot of these regulated industries are very prescriptive. So let's start with healthcare, right? A very heavily regulated industry. What you're going to be looking for there at a minimum in the U.S. is a provider that is HIPAA compliant, right? And HIPAA compliance is kind of self-certified. There are certain security best practices and protocols that get followed there. So certainly you want an offering that is HIPAA compliant. That involves things like encrypting the data at rest and in transit. It talks about least access rights to the data, secure controls over how you access the data, having your system be secure in terms of how it gets accessed, having it be automatically logging off customers so that sensitive data is not sitting around. But I think if you want to go beyond that and talk about looking for partners and vendors that have these certifications, in the healthcare space, there's a great evolving certification called the HITRUST certification, HITRUST CSF certification. And this has been kind of an accumulation of all the security and technology and best practices that have been put together because HIPAA is one of those things that doesn't have a formal certification. HITRUST is a formal certification that is well beyond HIPAA. It includes a bunch of other certifications, for things like NIST best practices, SOGAP, a lot of these other practices that are really about security. So if you're talking about a vendor who has these kind of certifications, what that makes you is very comfortable around other businesses that aren't healthcare, knowing that the data, the processes, the tooling, the systems are very hardened for security and safety. Another key thing for anybody that deals with payments, and this is really every industry, right? Certainly healthcare, legal, manufacturing, all of them, is payment card certainty. And this is in the industry, this is controlled by the payment card industry's data security standards, DSS. I think that's what it stands for. Long and short, you call it PCI certification, and that's for anybody who collects credit card information, a very rigorous set of standards that they have to comply to in order to be able to be allowed to continue to collect credit card information. And again, involves protecting the card information, restricting access to it, encryption, all of these other things. So you want to look for somebody who is PCI certified. In an ideal scenario, if you have a large partner, you want them to be PCI Level 1 certified. The levels go from, I think, 5 up to 1 in terms of increasing levels of security and a function of how much credit card transactions they process. If somebody's processing the occasional credit card transaction, maybe you're a little less concerned about it than if they're processing millions of dollars a day of transactions. So PCI Level 1 is the peak of that, and that's both as a merchant and as a service provider. There's 2 different categories. One of the merchant is, do I protect your credit card information when you're my customer and you're paying by credit card? Service provider is, do I offer a service that you can use to transit payment information? And fax is obviously one of those. So you want a cloud fax provider or a documents provider that is PCI Level 1 certified, both as a merchant for your protection and as a service provider for your customers' protection.
Good. All right. One of the questions that came in, we talked before about electronic medical record keeping, EMR software. Mm-hmm. This question was, can you also interface to applications like CRM or other applications?
Yeah, so absolutely. So a lot of times that will be done through the APIs, as I call them, or as everybody calls them. So there are these automated interfaces that allow you to interchange. This requires either a connector to the EHRs, which we do a lot of ourselves, or custom work, depending on the level of customization that needs to be done by the provider. But this is done all the time. And integrations, the key value of being in the digital domain is deeper integrations and an ability to incorporate the secure exchange of these documents into your workflow in a more efficient and automated way. So integrations are core to being able to realize the full benefit of that transformation into the cloud. So they happen all the time, and all of the cloud providers that are out there put together a lot of tools to help you integrate into your various systems, either with off-the-shelf integrations or tools that you can use to integrate your custom workflows into these tools.
Okay, so the next question that I have, I'm just trying to interpret it. I think what they're asking is, can you compare the level of security that comes from a bundled UCaaS solution to a cloud fax solution? Is there a comparison there?
It's a little bit of apples and oranges, I would say. Mm-hmm. One of the things that you're going to find in any kind of a bundled UCaaS solution is they have a certain level of security. I think that the questions that you want to ask in terms of these packages is, when I'm doing something that allows me to transfer sensitive information, is the information, when it's flowing, and this can be video, audio, documents, any of this stuff, when it's flowing, is that information protected or not? And protection typically takes the form of encryption, right? So is the flow of media, if you will, encrypted from the entire process, right? Is it anywhere open to a snooper or a listener being able to listen in on a conversation, mm-hmm. watch, cut in on a video, or intercept a document, right? So you want to look for encryption across the way. That is true in a UCaaS provider, and that is true in a cloud fax provider. And in both cases, you're looking for somebody who allows you, if you have sensitive information flowing, and every business does, full encryption, end to end, if possible. Certainly encryption at rest, when that, say, call recording gets stored to disk. If there's any sensitive information on it, that it's encrypted there, so that information, even if somebody were to hack into a system and steal the file, they still couldn't listen to or view or make use of that data because it's encrypted in addition to being protected. The protections are obviously key, right? And that's where you want to ask things like, are you doing external penetration tests? Are you doing vulnerability scans on a regular basis? Certainly at least annually, but look for that quarterly from good partners. Are you high trust certified if you're in the healthcare industry? Are you SOC 2 Type 2 certified in your data center if you're in a general operation? Are you PCI certified? Look for the certifications that are great signifiers about how much care they've taken in keeping their systems secured. Some of the tooling that is out there now in the UCaaS space tends to be based on open source, and that can be a little less secure than others. So you want to make sure that you understand, if you're leveraging some of these open source technologies as part of your solution, what steps have you taken to go beyond the default security and add levels of security of your own so that I, as a customer, can be comfortable with that. And I think if you're talking about UCaaS solutions, you want to be able to sell security as a feature. I know that we find that all the time, that the work that we've done to get HITRUST certified, for example, it's not just for customers' peace of mind. Security is a saleable feature, right? You're talking about convenience, you're talking about cost efficiency, but you're also talking about security. And you want to be able to offer all of those in a UCaaS solution to the customer so that they're getting kind of the best of all possible worlds here.
Okay. That's a very thorough question, answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question's again, it's a detailed question. So let me read it out verbatim. Maybe it'll help us. In healthcare applications, we are seeing the quality of MOS. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it. MOS score degrading as DNS resolution issues get serious to both private and public clouds. What are your suggestions?
So MOS scores are a function of the quality of the audio in a call, or the amount of jitter in a call. And so this does get very technical, but you can think of MOS scores as effectively a score that says how good was that call. When it comes to faxes, for example, faxes are very sensitive to this. If you and I are having this conversation, in fact, we lost you for a minute there, right? If that was a fax, that fax would have terminated right there and it would be done, right? You'd have to do another dial and another fax. When we're talking and the line gets a little staticky, or there's a little bit of a chop in and out, humans can handle that and deal with it. Faxes cannot, because they are really using that audio as a communications protocol for a computer protocol, not as humans talking to each other. Humans are great at handling dropouts, at handling degradations in quality, in handling jitter and delay. Fax communications are not. So one of the key things when it comes to these communications over SIP or VoIP is making sure that you've got clean lines, that you've got redundant systems, so that if you detect issues with call quality, you can route around those things. You're dealing with all of your carriers on a constant basis to make sure that they're keeping their underlying routes clean, and they're working on all of those things. When it comes into telehealth, customer-patient discussions, these kinds of things, and you have to deal with call quality issues, you want to make sure that you've got a provider that is not just single-sourced, right? You want to make sure that that provider is themselves monitoring their MOS scores or some form of quality scoring. And MOS scores are the industry standard, so that's what we look at, certainly. A MOS score that may be acceptable in a voice call, again, may not be acceptable in a fax call, but you look at that as a great way to keep track of, we've got millions of phone lines, right? We're not listening on phone lines. We have to have an automated way to keep track of the things that carriers are doing. And the big advantage there is because all of this is very localized to the network, and this network is a network, right? That means that there's all these different pieces to it. Being able to look at that in an automated way, say, we're having a problem in this region, let's talk to that carrier and talk about routing around that, or something as simple as rebooting a router in a switching office, or saying, you know what, this carrier has fallen below a certain mandatory quality, let's take them out of the routing mix for now, and then work with them to get back into the mix. These are the things that you go through here. DNS isn't the sole influencer of that. In fact, line quality is usually more involved than DNS per se, but any of the things that can degrade in the network can cause an influence on UCaaS communications. And so you want to have multiple redundant underlying carriers or underlying providers in your system so that you can tolerate outages. I mean, people in construction, backhoe cuts a fiber cable, you're going to lose some circuits there, and it may take them hours or maybe even a day or two to get the fiber recut and polished and put back in, right? These things happen. They happen in copper telephone wires. They happen in VoIP. The whole key is always redundancy and an ability to route around problems when they're encountered. So, you look for redundancy, you look for fault tolerance, and you look for just raw capacity. The other interesting challenge with VoIP is one of the things that UCaaS providers can do is jam more calls onto the same line, and that will also degrade your MOS scores. So that's one of the things you have to watch out for, is how much actual bandwidth am I getting, and is that bandwidth an appropriate amount for the kinds of communication that I want to have on that line.
Okay. I have one more question in the queue. If anybody has any more, we still have a little bit of time left. Again, another technical question. T.38 is sometimes not supported by SIP trunking. How does one avoid that issue in a UCaaS implementation?
So this is really going to be a function of the UCaaS platform or the CloudFax platform doing one of two things: either allowing you to either it itself automatically detecting and turning it on and off when it's supported, or allowing you to just turn it off if you're having trouble there. And you're right. The thing about T38 is it requires every carrier along the way to support it, and you may find that the initiating point and the terminating point are both T38 enabled properly, but some intermediate carrier in the middle is having problems and they haven't, multiplexed it or coded it and decoded it appropriately, and so you'll find that T38 is a challenge. What we find is that when T38 works, it tends to work, and when it doesn't work, it tends to be really, really problematic. So you need to be able to have an ability to say, you know what, either on a per route or a per call basis, don't even offer T38, or for per carrier, this carrier is just having trouble with T38. They've got a non-standard implementation, or they just don't support it very well. So you really have to have the flexibility to say, enable it when it's there and disable it when it's either ineffective or it's not there. And either that can be done dynamically in really sophisticated systems, or just on a persistent basis. If you just discover these calls are never working, let's just unconfigure that so that you can't use it in this particular communication.
Okay, I have one last question since I don't have any more in the queue. And it's really a very straightforward question. We've talked about CloudFax as a real opportunity, and an opportunity to augment a lot of the workflow implementations we're doing, a lot of the UCaaS implementations we're doing out there. What are the next steps if somebody wants to get started learning about and providing these solutions? What are the next steps?
So that's a great question. So if you are an end business, right, I think the best thing you can do is contact a partner who has done a lot of these implementations for you, right? And I will be nakedly self-serving and say, we obviously have, millions of customers, and we've done this a lot. But I think if you're talking about doing a digital transformation in your business, you want to find a partner who's going to spend the time with you to do it right? And that's where I think channel partners are particularly appealing, because they're going to be able to bring a number of solutions to play. It's probably not a one-size-fits-all. There's probably not one solution that works for everybody and does everything they want. So you're going to want a partner who will offer the appropriate array of options to you that satisfy your needs. So I think this is an area where it's not easy just to self-service online. I'm going to put this item in my cart and check out, and I'm done, right? So there's some work to be done there. I think that from a customer's perspective, finding a good partner who's very experienced with this is the absolute most important thing that you can do. I think from the reseller's perspective, getting a good stable of offerings so that, again, there's no single product that's going to be appropriately applicable to everyone. So get a good stable of products together so that when you have these customers coming to you, you understand, okay, for this customer, it's this combination of the products in my offering that is going to be the best fit for them. For that customer, it's a different offering. This customer may need a very simple, say, CloudFax is just an add-on to a more robust UCaaS solution that they have, but the faxing component in there is just either not available or it's not effective. This other customer may want healthcare interoperability, and so what can I do there that's even more sophisticated, very specific to them? And then what do I need to know? What partners do I need to have that can onboard them, implement them, make sure that they've been properly trained up to be used? And that's really, where channel partners are valuable, because they can become those expert consultants that are helping customers navigate a really dizzying array of options in the digital space. And a lot of them sound awfully similar. You want to look for partners that you've worked with enough so that okay, I've seen this use case and this solution works really well for it. And that's the thing, when customers are doing all that research themselves, it's really hard to do that effectively.
Yeah, I just took a quick look at our audience, and it strikes me that we have quite a few of those channel partners in the audience. Now, I'm guessing they're here to learn more about the opportunity, and I don't think it's talking out of school to suggest to them what their next steps would be.
Okay. So Well, if I can talk about our offerings, we have a fairly robust set of offerings around channel partners, resellers, and the like. We do a lot of custom integration work involved with some of these partners as well. It is just reach out to our business development team. There we've got John Mannion, who's the head of alliances and partnerships, a great contact for that. Jason is on his team and is very focused on driving a lot of these channel types of relationships forward. It is a huge area of opportunity for these businesses who are looking for additional options to put into their toolkit, if you will, and we are there to support that on the eFax corporate side with reselling options, with channel options, and even with partnerships potentially.
Excellent. As a matter of fact, I believe we have a slide available. If we could pop that slide up, folks, which has some contact information on it. And so those of you who are interested in becoming partners, this might be some worthwhile information for you to follow up on. Jeff, I got to thank you. This has been very enlightening for me. I think being somewhat of an old timer, I've known fax forever, and you don't expect the things that worked long ago to continue delivering value the way fax has. So clearly, you've brought something to the table that I think a lot of the community, both customers and partners, will be really interested in. I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank the folks here at Informa for producing our session today. Please join us next time, and have a great rest of the day.